Jeremiah 35 to 37. Also include chapter 34, which I seem to have forgotten in our list. Well, chapter 34 is an oracle that Jeremiah presents against Zedekiah. That's one of the last kings of the timing of the Judean kingdom. In 35 and really through chapter 39, we are now into 586, the actual fall of Jerusalem. And we'll see more of the detail when we read on into 2 Kings, chapters 24 and 25, I believe it is, where we have a point-for-point listing of what is done to Israel and to its kings. Chapter 36 is the main story that we can look at here. Jeremiah is told by God to record a scroll. Now, we think that this scroll could very well have been a first edition of his own book, the book of Jeremiah. And he's told to have Baruch actually do the writing. That might be indication that Jeremiah himself is illiterate. Don't be offended by that, because again, only 10% from what we know archaeologically and sociologically, only about 10% of the populace of a given city in the ancient world really could read or write, because it was considered something more of a business venture, where you were just recording things for business and legal purposes. Writing itself, and thus reading, was kind of like how we think of music scores today. We don't buy a music score and sit and read it and think of it that way. We always think of a score as something to be performed, right? And the same way with reading originally. Letters, alphabets, and writing in general was written to be publicly performed. And so Baruch is the name of Jeremiah's scribe or secretary or biographer even. His name appears both archaeologically. We found it on a boule or a clay impression in Jerusalem. We've also heard his name associated with non-biblical books. So Baruch is a popular name of a gentleman who seems to be, like we say, the possible biographer of Jeremiah. And he's a scribe, so he seems to be very literate. And that's why Jeremiah has Baruch actually do the writing on this scroll, which again could be a first edition of many of the chapters that we now know as the book of Jeremiah. Baruch then publicly recites this book to some royal scribes. These would be the king's scribes. The king at this point is Jehoiakim, again an evil king. These royal scribes hear the words of this book, which again, if they had heard the words of Jeremiah, the book itself, they would be hearing what Jeremiah is saying about the idolatrous nature of the southern kingdom and how God will destroy it. And so what the scribes do is they say, well, you better hide, Baruch, because this is not good news. But we'll defend these words as from Yahweh. And then they in turn read the book to Jehoiakim. Then chapter, is it 37, or the end of 36, has a point-for-point response of Jehoiakim and how he first cuts it up piece by piece, probably as it's being read to him. He instructs these scribes to cut it up and then throw each piece as it's being read into the fire. So God, of course, has the last word, where he says to Jeremiah, well, thus, because of the king's actions this time, which, by the way, is just the opposite of King Josiah, we remember, who found the book of the law in the temple and repented. Well, this king responds rebelliously, and then God has the last word by saying to Jeremiah, I want you to rewrite a second edition of what I had told Jehoiakim the first time, and the closing words of chapter 36 add other words to it, which is kind of a wink way of saying even worse. We will even add some of the things that God will do to the nation based upon Jehoiakim's actions. Chapter 37 then has Jehoiakim imprisoning Jeremiah. He catches him, and during these final days of the city of Jerusalem, he puts him in a cistern, which is just an empty hole for collecting rainwater, and then at the end he has a little bit of mercy on him, and he brings him up into the prison court system, or the outer courts of the prison. But the book of Jeremiah, or the chapter 37, ends with Jeremiah in prison, in the court of the prison of King Zedekiah. One other thing, back in chapter 34, it's verses 18 to 20, it reflects something that we saw back in Genesis 15, where an animal is cut in two sacrificially, and parties of a treaty are asked to walk in between the animal pieces. I should mention that this is also noted, and I had made this recommendation before, that sacrifice like this kind seems to be borrowed from the ancient world, because we have found evidence in the Hittite culture, and also Esarhaddon from Assyria has a treaty that talks about walking between pieces of a sacrificed animal. The point is, and this is in the treaty that Esarhaddon writes, that the point of walking between a sacrificed animal is that you, as a party or part of this treaty, that what you're signifying is, this will happen to us as we walk between this animal that has been killed. May the same thing happen to us if you or I break this treaty. So that seems to be the picture being defined in that sort of a sacrifice and that sort of a treaty.